The sunlight poured down on the quiet suburban street as 10-year-old Andre raced his remote control car across the smooth concrete of his family's driveway. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon in late spring, the kind that felt like a gift after months of cold weather and being stuck indoors. The silver and blue car zipped back and forth, its electric motor whirring as it responded to Andre's careful touch on the controller. "Watch this," Andre called out to no one in particular, just enjoying the sound of his own voice in the open air as he made the car perform a perfect figure-8 pattern. The toy had been his birthday present 2 weeks earlier, and he still couldn't believe how cool it was. His dad had promised to teach him how to modify it to go even faster when he got back from his work trip to Washington, D.C. Andre's dad wasn't around as much as either of them would like. Being a congressman meant long hours and lots of travel, but when he was home, those moments were special. They would build things together, watch old sci-fi movies that his dad loved from when he was a kid, and talk about everything from space, exploration to what Andre wanted to be when he grew up. Their house sat on a corner lot in a neighborhood that had once been considered average but had grown more upscale over the years as more professionals and government workers moved in. It was the kind of place where most families knew each other, at least by sight, though the sense of community wasn't what it had been when Andre's grandparents first bought the house decades ago. Andre's mom was inside preparing an early dinner. She had cracked the kitchen window open so she could hear him playing, while she chopped vegetables and marinated chicken for the grill. Every few minutes she would glance outside, watching her son enjoying the simple pleasure of being a child on a beautiful day. "Don't go into the street, okay?" she had reminded him before he went outside. "And stay where I can see you from the kitchen." "I know, Mom," Andre had replied with the slight eye roll that had recently become part of his growing personality. He was a good kid, responsible for his age, but he was reaching that stage where he wanted to prove he could handle things on his own. The remote control car suddenly veered off course when Andre accidentally pushed the control stick too far to the right. It shot across the lawn and bounced off the low decorative stone wall that separated their property from the sidewalk. The car flipped over, landing wheels up on the grass. "Aw, man." Andre jogged over to rescue his prized possession, carefully turning it right side up and examining it for damage. The car seemed fine, and relief washed over him. He didn't want to explain to his dad how he'd broken his birthday gift so quickly. Andre decided to try something more challenging. Their yard had a slight slope on one side, creating a natural ramp that he thought would be perfect for making the car jump. He positioned the toy at the top of the incline and backed up, planning his approach. At that moment, his mom called from the kitchen window. "Andre, come wash your hands. I need your help with something." "Just 5 more minutes, Mom," he called back, eyes still fixed on the perfect jump he was about to execute. "Now, please," came the firm reply that meant there would be no negotiation. Andre sighed dramatically but knew better than to argue. He gave the controller one last loving look before setting it down on the porch steps. His car would have to wait. Inside, the house smelled amazing. His mom was making her famous lemon herb chicken, and the scent of garlic and spices filled the air. "Can you set the table?" she asked, hands busy with food preparation. "Your aunt might stop by later, so set for 3 just in case." Andre nodded and began gathering plates from the cabinet. His aunt, his dad's sister, lived a few neighborhoods over and often dropped in unannounced when his father was away. She said it was to check on them, but Andre suspected she just liked his mom's cooking. "When's Dad coming home?" Andre asked, carefully placing forks and knives beside each plate. "Tomorrow evening," his mom replied. "His committee meeting finished early, so he's catching an earlier flight." This news brightened Andre's mood considerably. An extra day with Dad meant maybe they could work on the remote control car upgrade sooner than planned. "Can we pick him up at the airport?" Andre asked hopefully. His mom smiled. "We'll see. It depends on what time his flight gets in." Task complete, Andre looked longingly out the window. "Can I go back outside now?" His mom glanced at the clock. 20 more minutes, then dinner. "And stay in the front yard where I can see you." "Thanks, Mom." Andre was already heading for the door, eager to return to his interrupted plans. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. Andre retrieved his controller from the porch steps and powered up the car again. He was determined to make at least one good jump before dinner. This time he backed the car up further, giving it more runway to build speed before hitting the natural ramp of the sloped yard. With intense concentration, he pushed the control stick forward, sending the car racing toward the incline. The timing was perfect. The car hit the slope at just the right speed, launching into the air in a graceful arc that made Andre pump his fist in victory. But his celebration was short-lived as the car sailed further than he expected, clearing the decorative wall and landing with a clatter on the sidewalk beyond. "No, no," Andre muttered, running to the edge of the yard. The car had bounced off the sidewalk and now lay in the grass of the public strip between the sidewalk and the street. From what he could see, it looked undamaged, but it had ended up outside the boundaries his mother had set. Andre glanced back at the house. From the kitchen window, his mom wouldn't be able to see this particular spot. He knew he should probably call her to ask permission to retrieve the car, but that would mean admitting he'd let it go out of bounds. And it was just a few steps away. He could grab it and be back in seconds. Making a quick decision, Andre hopped over the low stone wall and hurried to his car. He picked it up, relieved to find it still in working order, and was about to head back when he noticed an older man watching him from across the street. The man, who Andre didn't recognize, was staring with an expression that made the boy uncomfortable. Andre gave a small, polite wave. His parents had taught him to be courteous to adults, but the man didn't wave back. Instead, he pulled out his phone and seemed to be typing something. Feeling suddenly uneasy, Andre clutched his car to his chest and quickly returned to his yard, hopping back over the wall. Once safely on his own property, he looked back, but the man had walked away. The encounter left Andre with a strange feeling he couldn't quite name. He'd lived in this neighborhood his whole life, but lately, his parents had been having more serious talks with him about being careful, about how some people might see him differently because of the color of his skin. His dad especially would sit him down for what he called real talk about how to behave if strangers or even police officers ever approached him. "It's not fair," his dad would say, "but it's the world we live in, and my job is to keep you safe." Andre didn't fully understand everything his father told him during these talks, but he knew they were important. Standing in his yard now, the remote control car held tightly in his hands, he wondered if the man across the street had been upset to see him outside the boundary of his own yard. Pushing the uncomfortable thoughts aside, Andre decided to stay on the driveway for his remaining outside time. He set the car down and went back to making it zip back and forth in complex patterns, occasionally glancing up to see if the strange man had returned. The shadows grew longer as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Andre was so absorbed in his play that he almost didn't notice the police car that slowly turned onto his street, cruising at a pace that seemed deliberately unhurried. Something about the vehicle made Andre pause his game. He watched as it approached, then slowed even further as it neared his house. The car came to a complete stop directly in front of his driveway. Andre stood frozen, the controller still in his hands, as two officers emerged from the vehicle. They surveyed the property before their gaze settled on him. It was at that moment that Andre remembered everything his father had taught him about encounters like this. Stand still. Be respectful. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements. His heart began to race, even though he knew he hadn't done anything wrong. He was just a kid playing in his own front yard. But the serious expressions on the officers' faces as they approached the edge of his driveway told him that somehow, in some way he couldn't understand, something was very wrong. As the officers drew closer, Andre wished more than anything that his dad was home. His congressman father knew how to talk to people with authority, knew exactly what to say in any situation. But his dad was still hundreds of miles away and Andre was on his own. One of the officers raised a hand in greeting, but there was no smile to accompany the gesture. "Hello there, young man," he called out. "We need to have a quick word with you." Andre swallowed hard, remembering his father's words, "Stay calm, be polite. Remember who you are." What he didn't know was that his mother had just looked out the kitchen window and seen the police car. She was already moving toward the front door, a cold fear gripping her heart. The same fear that had been passed down through generations of parents who looked like her, raising children who looked like Andre. The afternoon that had started so perfectly was about to change in ways that would affect not just Andre's family, but perhaps an entire community. Andre stood completely still on his driveway, the remote controller hanging loosely from his hand. The two officers approached with measured steps, their faces set in serious expressions that made his stomach tighten. One was tall with broad shoulders, the other shorter with a trim mustache. Both wore dark sunglasses despite the fading afternoon light. "Hello, officers," Andre said quietly, remembering his father's careful instructions about being polite but not overly familiar. His voice came out smaller than he intended. The taller officer spoke first. "We received a call about suspicious activity in this area. Someone jumping over property walls." His eyes moved from Andre to the toy car on the driveway, then back to the boy. "Do you live here?" Before Andre could answer, the screen door swung open and his mother stepped onto the porch. She moved with deliberate calm, but Andre could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful way she held herself. "Can I help you, officers?" she called out, her voice steady as she descended the porch steps. She walked toward Andre and placed a protective hand on his shoulder. The shorter officer turned toward her. "Ma'am, we're responding to a call about a young male jumping fences in the neighborhood. Just doing our due diligence." Andre's mother tightened her grip slightly on his shoulder. "This is my son. He's playing in our yard with his birthday present." She gestured toward the remote control car. "We live here." "I understand," the taller officer said, his tone neutral. "But we still need to verify some information. Protocol when we receive these kinds of calls." Andre looked up at his mother, whose face remained composed despite the slight tightening around her eyes. He knew that look. It was the same one she wore during parent-teacher conferences when someone underestimated him, or when store security followed them too closely at the mall. "My car went over our wall," Andre explained, pointing to the decorative stone barrier. "I just jumped over to get it back. That's all." The officers exchanged glances, and the shorter one pulled out a small notepad. "What's your name, son?" Andre looked to his mother, who gave a small nod. "Andre Johnson," he answered. "And your address is this residence?" 1420 Oakwood Drive? The officer continued, jotting down the information. "Yes," Andre's mother answered firmly. "I'm Dr. Tanya Johnson. My husband and I have owned this home for 8 years." The mention of doctor caused a brief pause in the officer's writing, but he continued without comment. "And is there anyone else who can verify your residence here?" Andre felt his mother's fingers press more firmly into his shoulder. "Officer, with all due respect, why do you need verification beyond my statement that this is our home? Would you like to see my identification? Or perhaps you'd prefer I show you the family photos hanging in our living room?" The edge in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Andre recognized it as her professional voice, the one she used when dealing with difficult situations at the hospital where she worked. The taller officer removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that looked tired around the edges. "Ma'am, we're just following procedure." "When we get a call—" "I understand procedure," she interrupted. "I also understand that my 10-year-old son was playing in his own front yard with a toy. I'd like to know exactly what suspicious activity was reported." Across the street, curtains moved in windows as neighbors took notice of the scene unfolding. An elderly couple had emerged onto their porch, watching with concerned expressions. The neighborhood had always been peaceful, interactions with police rare enough to draw attention. The shorter officer closed his notepad. The caller reported someone who appeared to be trespassing, jumping over property barriers. Andre's mother let out a short, humorless laugh. "So my son retrieved his toy from beyond our decorative wall and someone called the police? Is that what you're telling me?" The officers didn't immediately respond, but their silence was answer enough. Andre felt a complex mixture of emotions, confusion, embarrassment, and a growing sense of injustice that he couldn't fully articulate. He thought about the man who had watched him from across the street, the one who hadn't returned his friendly wave. Had that man called the police on him? The sound of a car approaching drew everyone's attention. A silver sedan pulled up behind the police cruiser, and a woman with gray-streaked hair emerged wearing business casual clothes and carrying a leather bag. Andre immediately recognized his Aunt Vivian, his father's sister. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern as she took in the scene, her nephew and sister-in-law standing in the driveway, flanked by police officers. "Tanya, everything okay here?" she called as she approached, her pace quickening. "Perfect timing, Viv," Andre's mother replied, a hint of relief in her voice. "These officers were just verifying that we do, in fact, live in our own home." Aunt Vivian reached them, placing herself slightly in front of Andre and his mother in a subtle but unmistakable gesture of protection. "I'm Vivian Johnson, sister of Congressman Robert Johnson. This is his home, his wife and his son." She spoke with the practiced precision of someone used to navigating difficult situations. "May I ask what prompted this visit?" The mention of Congressman created a visible shift in the officer's demeanor. The taller one straightened slightly, while the shorter one reopened his notepad as if suddenly remembering something important. "Congressman Johnson, from the 5th District?" the taller officer asked, his tone noticeably different. "The same," Aunt Vivian confirmed. "He's currently in D.C. but returning tomorrow. I'd be happy to give you his office number if you'd like to discuss this matter with him directly." Andre watched as the officers exchanged another glance, this one carrying a different weight than before. He didn't fully understand the politics of the situation, but he could sense the shift in power that had just occurred. "That won't be necessary," the shorter officer said, tucking away his notepad. "We were just responding to a call, doing our job. Everything seems to be in order here." Andre's mother hadn't moved, her hand still resting protectively on his shoulder. "And if my husband wasn't a congressman? If we couldn't provide this extra level of verification, what would have happened then?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and pointed. The taller officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're just doing our jobs, responding to calls as they come in." "I understand," she replied, her voice steady. "And I hope you understand that my son was just doing his job too, being a child playing in his own yard." Aunt Vivian stepped closer to Andre, placing her hand on his other shoulder. He now stood between the two women, feeling both protected and somehow responsible for the tension surrounding them. "I think we're done here," Aunt Vivian said, not phrased as a question. The officers nodded, offering brief, professional goodbyes before returning to their vehicle. As they pulled away, the neighbors who had been watching began to disperse, some lingering with concerned expressions, others quickly retreating inside. Once the police car had disappeared around the corner, Andre felt his mother's posture change, the rigid control giving way to a subtle trembling. She knelt down in front of him, her eyes searching his face. "Are you okay, baby?" she asked softly. Andre nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure if it was true. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said, needing to hear the confirmation. "No, you didn't," his mother assured him, pulling him into a tight hug. Not a single thing. Aunt Vivian joined them, creating a circle of family right there on the driveway where moments before there had been an interrogation. "Let's go inside," she suggested gently. "I think we could all use something cold to drink." As they walked toward the house, Andre glanced back at his remote control car, still sitting on the driveway where he'd left it. The toy that had brought him such joy earlier now seemed different somehow, as if the afternoon's events had changed it along with everything else. Inside, the house felt like a sanctuary, the familiar sense of his mother's cooking, and the warm lighting a stark contrast to the harsh exchange outside. Andre sat at the kitchen counter while his mother poured lemonade and Aunt Vivian made a phone call in the living room. He could hear snippets of her conversation. "Yes, right in front of the house," and "No, they left when I mentioned who Rob was." His mother placed a glass of lemonade in front of him, then leaned against the counter. "Andre," she began carefully, "I want to talk about what happened." Andre took a sip of his drink, the tartness matching his mood. "Someone called the police because I jumped over our wall to get my car," he said, the unfairness of it all suddenly overwhelming. "That man across the street, he saw me and didn't wave back. I think he called them." His mother nodded slowly. "That might be what happened. And it's not right and it's not fair." She paused, choosing her words with care. "Your father and I have talked to you about this before, about how some people might see you differently." "Because I'm black," Andre said quietly. "Not a question." "Yes," his mother confirmed, her voice both gentle and firm. "And it's not your fault and it's not your burden to fix. But it is something we have to navigate together." Aunt Vivian returned to the kitchen, her phone call complete. "Rob's catching an earlier flight," she announced. "He'll be home tonight instead of tomorrow." Andre felt a rush of relief at the news. His father would know what to do, how to make sense of this. "Did you tell him what happened?" his mother asked. Aunt Vivian nodded. "Everything. He's already made some calls." She turned to Andre with a small smile. "Your dad said to tell you he's proud of how you handled yourself." Andre wasn't sure what he'd done to make his father proud. He'd just stood there, scared and confused. But the words still warmed him. As the evening progressed, the initial shock of the incident began to fade, replaced by a thoughtful kind of quiet that fell over the house. Dinner was served, conversations happened, but underneath it all was a current of something significant, something changing. Later, as Andre got ready for bed, He could hear his mother and aunt talking in low voices in the living room. He paused at the top of the stairs, listening. "It's going to get worse before it gets better," Aunt Vivian was saying. "Rob's committee work is making waves." "I know," his mother replied. "But this was different. This was Andre." The gravity in her voice made Andre realize that today hadn't just been about a misunderstanding or a nosy neighbor. It was about something bigger, something his parents had been preparing him for in ways he was only beginning to understand. As he climbed into bed, Andre thought about his father flying home early, about the congressman leaving important work in Washington because of what had happened today. He thought about the look on his mother's face when she'd faced the officers, and the way Aunt Vivian had positioned herself protectively in front of them both. Tomorrow would bring his father's return and whatever came next. But tonight Andre lay awake for a long time, replaying the afternoon's events and wondering what it all meant for his family, for his neighborhood, and for the country his father was working to change. The sound of a car door closing in the driveway woke Andre just after midnight. He sat up in bed, instantly alert, and hurried to his window. In the soft glow of the porch light, he could see his father's tall figure retrieving a suitcase from the trunk of a taxi. Without hesitation, Andre ran downstairs, taking the steps two at a time despite his mother's frequent reminders about being careful. He reached the front door just as it opened, revealing his father's tired but relieved face. "Dad!" Andre launched himself forward, wrapped in his father's familiar embrace within seconds. Congressman Robert Johnson dropped his briefcase to properly hug his son, lifting him slightly off the ground despite Andre's growing size. "Hey, champ," he said, his voice a comforting rumble against Andre's ear. Andre's mother appeared in the hallway, wrapped in her robe, hair tied back for sleep. The look that passed between his parents contained volumes of unspoken communication. "You made good time," she said simply, moving forward to embrace her husband once he set Andre down. "Caught the last flight out," he replied, keeping one arm around Andre's shoulders as he kissed his wife. "Vivian filled me in on some of it, but I want to hear everything." His eyes returned to Andre, a mixture of concern and reassurance in his gaze. "You okay, son?" Andre nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the day's events now that his father was here to help carry it. "I'm okay. They didn't do anything to me. They just asked questions." His father's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Let's sit down and talk." In the living room, with the house quiet around them, Andre recounted the afternoon's events, playing with his remote control car, retrieving it from beyond the wall, noticing the man watching him, and finally, the arrival of the police officers. His mother filled in details from her perspective, describing how she'd looked out the window to see officers approaching her son. And then Aunt Vivian showed up. Andre continued. "She told them you're a congressman, and they started acting different." His father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Different how?" Andre considered this. "Like nervous. Like when Principal Davis realizes you're coming to a school meeting." A small smile touched his father's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And how did you feel during all this?" Andre looked down at his hands. It was a difficult question. "Scared at first," he admitted. "Then confused, then—" He searched for the right word. "Angry. But not yelling angry. More like—" He patted his chest. "You didn't hear angry." His father nodded slowly. "That's called indignation. It's what we feel when something unjust happens." "Why did that man call the police on me?" Andre asked, the question that had been troubling him since the afternoon. "I was just getting my car." His parents exchanged another look, the kind that told Andre they were deciding how much to say, how to frame the truth in a way he could handle. "Some people see danger where there isn't any," his mother finally said, "especially when it comes to young black boys and men." "But I'm just a kid," Andre protested. "I wasn't doing anything wrong." "I know," his father said, his voice gentle but firm. "And that's exactly why what happened today matters so much. Because you weren't doing anything wrong, and still, those officers came to question you in your own yard." Andre's mother reached out to smooth his hair, a gesture of comfort she'd been making since he was tiny. "Your father and I have tried to prepare you for this kind of thing, but it's different when it actually happens." His father stood up and paced across the living room, a habit Andre recognized from watching him practice important speeches at home. "Tomorrow I'm going to make some calls," he said. "The police chief and I need to have a conversation. Not just about what happened to you, but about the bigger picture. Are the officers going to get in trouble? Andre asked, uncertain how he felt about that possibility. His father stopped pacing. This isn't about punishing those specific officers, son. It's about changing how things work so this happens less often to kids like you. He sat back down, making sure Andre was looking directly at him. But I want you to know something important. What happened today was not your fault. Not one bit of it. Andre nodded, though the knot in his stomach suggested he hadn't fully accepted this truth yet. It's late, his mother said gently. We should all get some sleep. We can talk more in the morning. As Andre climbed the stairs back to his bedroom, he could hear his parents' voices resuming their conversation, too low now to make out the words. He knew they would talk for hours, planning and processing. That was how they handled difficult things, together with careful thought and strategic action. Morning arrived with the smell of pancakes, his father's specialty. When Andre came downstairs, he found his dad at the stove, spatula in hand, while his mother sat at the kitchen island with her coffee and tablet, reading news headlines. There he is, his father said with a warm smile. Hungry? The normalcy of the scene was comforting after yesterday's events. Andre nodded eagerly, sliding onto a stool beside his mother, who kissed the top of his head before returning to her reading. His father placed a stack of blueberry pancakes in front of him. So I've been thinking, he began in the casual tone that often preceded important conversations. How would you feel about coming with me to a meeting today? Andre paused mid-bite. What kind of meeting? I've arranged to speak with Chief Patterson of the police department this afternoon. Thought you might want to be part of that conversation. Andre's mother looked up from her tablet. Rob, are you sure that's appropriate? The question wasn't challenging so much as seeking confirmation. His father nodded. I think it's important for the chief to see Andre, to understand who we're talking about. And I think it's important for Andre to see how we address these situations, not with anger but with purpose. Andre considered this as he chewed. The thought of facing police officers again made his stomach tighten. But sitting beside his father, being included in this adult response to yesterday's events, appealed to him. I want to go, he decided. His mother studied him carefully. You don't have to, sweetheart. Your dad can handle this. I know, Andre replied, but I want to. His father's hand came to rest on his shoulder, a gesture of both pride and protection. Then it's settled. We'll go together. The police headquarters was a modern building downtown, all glass and steel with the city's flag flying alongside the state and national banners. Andre had passed it many times but had never been inside. As they walked through the main entrance, his father's hand rested lightly on his back, a reassuring presence. People recognized Congressman Johnson immediately. There were respectful nods, a few whispered comments as they passed. Andre walked tall beside his father, conscious of the curious glances directed his way. They were escorted to a conference room where 3 people waited. A gray-haired man in uniform with a chief's insignia, a woman in a business suit, and one of the officers from yesterday, the taller one who had first approached Andre. Congressman Johnson, the chief said, rising to shake his father's hand. Thank you for coming in. And this must be Andre. Andre shook hands as his father had taught him, firm grip, eye contact, clear greeting. Yes, sir. They all sat around the table, and Andre noticed how his father positioned their chairs so they were side by side, facing the others as a united front. I appreciate you making time for this meeting, Chief Patterson, his father began. As you know, yesterday 2 of your officers responded to a call about my son, who was playing in our front yard. The chief nodded. Yes, and I want to apologize for any distress this caused your family. Officer Reynolds here was one of the responding officers and wanted to be present for this discussion. The officer, Reynolds, nodded solemnly toward Andre and his father. Sir, I want to say personally that I regret how the situation unfolded. Andre's father acknowledged this with a slight nod but continued. What concerns me isn't just what happened to Andre, though that's certainly my primary focus as his father. What concerns me is what would have happened if my sister hadn't arrived, if Andre's mother hadn't been home, if our family didn't have the resources and connections that we do. The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled over everyone. I sit on the Judiciary Committee, his father continued. I've been working on police reform legislation for years. But yesterday this wasn't about policy or politics. This was about my son being treated as suspicious for playing in his own yard. The woman in the business suit spoke up. Congressman, I'm Director Hartwell from Community Relations. We're implementing new training programs specifically addressing these kinds of situations. Training is essential, Andre's father agreed. But so is accountability. So is changing the culture that makes a neighbor call the police on a child retrieving a toy. Andre listened intently, watching the faces around the table. The chief looked concerned but defensive. The woman was earnestly taking notes. Officer Reynolds seemed genuinely uncomfortable. Then, to Andre's surprise, his father turned to him. Andre, would you like to tell them how yesterday made you feel? All eyes shifted to him, and Andre felt a moment of panic. He hadn't expected to speak, but looking at his father's encouraging expression, he found his courage. I was scared, he began simply, not because I did anything wrong, but because I didn't understand why the police were talking to me in my own yard. He paused, gathering his thoughts. My dad has taught me about being careful, about how to act when police are around. But yesterday was the first time I really understood why he has to teach me those things. The room was completely silent now, every adult focused on his words. I love my remote control car, Andre continued, but today I didn't even want to play with it. I kept thinking about whether someone would call the police again if I went outside. His voice grew smaller. I don't think that's fair. His father's hand found his shoulder again, squeezing gently with pride. The chief cleared his throat, clearly moved by Andre's words. No, young man, it's not fair, and I want you to know that we're going to do better. As the meeting continued, Andre felt a strange mix of emotions, pride at being included, sadness about the situation that had brought them here, and a growing understanding of his father's work. This meeting, he realized, was just one small part of a much larger effort his father was engaged in. Later, as they walked back to the car, his father asked, "What did you think about that?" Andre considered the question carefully. "I think they listened, but I'm not sure if things will actually change." His father smiled, a bittersweet expression. "That's pretty insightful, son. Change is slow, especially when it comes to systems as big as law enforcement. But every conversation matters. Every person who understands the problem better matters. Like how Officer Reynolds seemed different today than yesterday." Exactly like that, his father confirmed. Sometimes putting a human face on an issue is the most powerful thing we can do. Today you were that human face. As they drove home, Andre looked out at his city with new eyes, understanding a little more about his place in it, and about the work his father did every day to make it better. The next morning, Andre woke to the sound of voices downstairs, more than just his parents. Curious, he dressed quickly and made his way to the living room, where he found his father sitting with 3 other adults he didn't recognize. Papers and laptops covered the coffee table, and empty coffee mugs suggested they'd been there for some time. His father looked up and smiled. "Morning, champ. Come meet some people." Andre approached cautiously, suddenly aware he was still in his weekend clothes, sweatpants, and his favorite space-themed t-shirt. "This is Andre," his father said proudly. "Andre, these are some of my staff members who came over to help us with a project. This is Gabrielle, my chief of staff." He indicated a woman with short natural hair and glasses. "This is Deshawn, my communications director." A tall man with a closely trimmed beard nodded. "And this is Perry, my legislative aide." The third visitor, younger than the others, gave Andre a friendly wave. "Nice to meet you all," Andre said politely, though he was confused about why his father's work team was in their living room on a Sunday. His mother appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of fresh coffee. "Breakfast is ready in the kitchen, Andre. Pancakes are keeping warm in the oven." As Andre turned to go, his father said, "When you're done eating, come back and join us. We're working on something I think you'll be interested in." In the kitchen, Andre found his Aunt Vivian already seated at the counter, scrolling through her phone while she ate. "Morning, kiddo," she said, looking up with a smile.
"How are you feeling today?"
Andre shrugged as he retrieved a plate and helped himself to pancakes. "Okay, I guess. Dad has a bunch of people here." Aunt Vivian nodded. "Your father moves fast when he's motivated. And right now he's very motivated. Because of what happened to me? That's part of it," she said carefully. "But it's also about all the other kids like you who don't have a congressman for a father." Andre considered this as he poured syrup over his pancakes. "What are they working on out there?" Why don't you finish eating and go find out? Aunt Vivian suggested with a small smile. 20 minutes later, Andre returned to the living room, where the conversation paused as he entered. Perfect timing, his father said, patting the space next to him on the couch. We're putting together a community forum about police-community relations, specifically focusing on interactions with young people. It's going to happen next weekend at the community center. That's fast, Andre observed, settling beside his father. The woman named Gabrielle laughed. Your dad is famous for moving quickly when he sees an opportunity for change. We're striking while the iron is hot, his father explained. Chief Patterson agreed to participate along with several officers, community leaders, and youth advocates. And we want you to be part of it, Deshawn added. If you're comfortable with that. Andre looked at his father in surprise. Me, what would I do? His father's expression grew serious. You would share your experience, son. Help people understand how it felt to be questioned by police in your own yard while just playing with a toy. The thought made Andre's stomach tighten with nervousness. In front of everyone? Like a speech? More like a conversation, Perry explained. I would ask you some questions and you would just answer honestly. No prepared statements, no pressure. Andre's father placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. This is completely your choice, Andre. If you don't want to participate, that's absolutely fine. What happened to you is already making a difference. The chief has already agreed to review their dispatch protocols for calls about young people. Andre thought about it. The idea of speaking in front of a crowd was intimidating. But he also remembered how it felt to share his feelings in the meeting with the police chief, how the adults really seemed to listen to him in a way they might not listen to each other. Will other kids be there? He asked. Kids like me? Gabrielle nodded. We're reaching out to youth groups, schools, and community centers. There will be plenty of young people in the audience. And maybe your experience will help them know what to do if something similar happens to them, his father added. Andre took a deep breath. Okay, I'll do it. The relief and pride on his father's face confirmed he'd made the right decision. The week that followed was busy with preparations. Andre's father was constantly on the phone or in meetings, but he still made time each evening to sit with Andre and talk through what the community forum would be like and what kinds of questions might be asked. Just be honest, his father advised. Your truth is powerful exactly as it is. At school, Andre found himself distracted thinking about the upcoming event. He hadn't told his friends about what happened or about the forum. Somehow it felt too big, too personal to share casually over lunch or during recess. But on Thursday, his teacher, Ms. Thompson, pulled him aside after class. Andre, your mother called the school to let us know about the community forum this weekend, she said kindly. That's a very brave thing you're doing. Andre looked down at his shoes. I'm kind of nervous about it, Ms. Thompson smiled. That's natural. But you know what? I was thinking our class might benefit from learning about civic engagement. Would it be okay if I mentioned the forum to everyone tomorrow? Some of your classmates and their families might want to attend. The thought of his friends being in the audience was both nerve-wracking and comforting. After a moment, Andre nodded. That would be okay. Excellent, Ms. Thompson said. And Andre, I'm very proud of you. By Saturday morning, Andre's nervousness had reached a peak. He changed his outfit 3 times before his mother gently suggested the blue button-down shirt and khaki pants they'd originally picked out together. You look very handsome, she assured him as she helped straighten his collar. And more importantly, you look like yourself. The community center was already crowded when they arrived. The main hall had been set up with rows of chairs facing a stage where a long table with microphones had been placed. People of all ages were filing in. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers in groups, and plenty of adults in business attire who looked like they might be officials or reporters. Andre's father was immediately approached by several people wanting to shake his hand or have a quick word. Andre stayed close to his mother, watching the room fill up and trying to calm the butterflies in his stomach. Andre, a familiar voice called out. He turned to see his friend Thomas waving, accompanied by his parents. Soon after, he spotted several more classmates arriving with their families, the result of Ms. Thompson's announcement. Seeing these familiar faces helped settle his nerves a bit. These were people who knew him as just Andre, the kid who was good at science projects and who loved space and remote control cars, not as a congressman's son or the subject of a police incident. As the start time approached, Andre's father led him to a small room off the main hall where the other panelists were gathering. Chief Patterson was there in his dress uniform, along with Officer Reynolds from the meeting earlier in the week. There were also several adults Andre didn't recognize, introduced as community leaders and youth advocates. "Everyone," his father said, drawing attention their way. "This is my son, Andre." The adults all smiled warmly at him, and a woman with colorful braids bent slightly to address him at eye level. "Thank you for being here, Andre," she said. "My name is Dr. Powell, and I run the youth center across town. What you're doing today is really important." Andre managed a smile despite his nerves. "Thank you." His father checked his watch. "It's time. Remember, Andre, just speak from your heart. That's all anyone is asking of you." They filed onto the stage, taking their assigned seats at the table. Andre sat between his father and Perry, the legislative aide who would be moderating the discussion. From the stage, the crowd looked even larger than before, at least 200 people filling every available chair and standing along the walls. Perry welcomed everyone, explained the format of the forum, and introduced each panelist. When he got to Andre, he said simply, "And this is Andre Johnson, a local student who recently experienced firsthand the issue we're here to discuss today." The forum began with prepared statements from several of the adults. Chief Patterson spoke about the department's commitment to building trust with the community. Dr. Powell discussed the impact of police interactions on young people's development and sense of safety. Andre's father talked about the need for policy changes at both local and national levels. Then Perry turned to Andre. "Andre, can you tell us what happened last weekend when you were playing in your yard?" Andre took a deep breath, glanced at his father, who gave him an encouraging nod, and began to speak. His voice shook slightly at first but grew steadier as he recounted the events, playing with his remote control car, retrieving it from beyond the wall, the arrival of the police officers, and how it had made him feel. "I didn't understand what I did wrong," he concluded. "And that's what bothered me the most, feeling like I was in trouble when I was just being a kid." A hush had fallen over the room as he spoke, every face attentive. Andre noticed some parents pulling their children closer, saw teachers nodding in recognition, and even spotted Officer Reynolds looking down at his hands with a troubled expression. Perry asked a few follow-up questions, which Andre answered honestly. Then the discussion opened to include the other panelists, who related Andre's experience to broader issues and proposed solutions. When Chief Patterson spoke again, he addressed Andre directly. "Young man, I want to thank you for your courage in sharing your story. It's because of voices like yours that we can see where our systems are failing our community's children." The forum continued for nearly 2 hours, eventually opening to questions from the audience. Many were directed at the police representatives or the policy experts, but a few came to Andre. A boy about his age, standing with his mother, asked, "Were you scared when the police came to talk to you?" Andre nodded. "Yes, but not because I thought they would hurt me. I was scared because I didn't know what was happening or why they were there." Another question came from a teenager in the back. "Has this changed how you feel about your neighborhood?" Andre thought about this carefully before answering. "A little bit. I'm more aware now that not everyone might see me the way I see myself, but my neighborhood is still my home, and most people there are good neighbors." As the forum drew to a close, Perry asked each panelist for final thoughts. When it was Andre's turn, he hadn't prepared anything, but the words came naturally. "I just want to be able to play in my yard without worrying," he said simply. "And I want that for every kid, no matter what they look like or where they live." The applause that followed was thunderous, people rising to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to wash over the stage in waves. Andre's father placed a proud hand on his shoulder, and his mother, watching from the front row, had tears in her eyes. As they left the stage, person after person approached Andre to thank him, to shake his hand, or simply to tell him they were proud of him. His classmates surrounded him with excited chatter, treating him with a new kind of respect. A local news reporter asked for a brief interview, which his father allowed, after checking if Andre was comfortable with it. The reporter knelt down to Andre's level, microphone in hand. Andre, you spoke very powerfully today. What do you hope will come from this community forum? Andre looked at his father, then back at the reporter. I hope people will listen to each other more, he said, and I hope kids like me can just be kids. Later that evening, exhausted but satisfied, Andre sat between his parents on their living room couch watching the local news coverage of the forum. You did something important today, his father told him. Something that might help change things, even if it's just a little bit. Andre leaned against his father's shoulder, thinking about the day, the nervousness that had given way to determination, the faces in the crowd, the feeling of being truly heard. Dad, he asked quietly, does your work always feel this big? His father chuckled. Not always. A lot of the time it's boring meetings and paperwork. But days like today, when something real happens, when people connect and listen to each other, these are the days that matter most. As the news segment ended, showing a final clip of Andre speaking on stage, he felt a strange mix of emotions, pride, hope, and a new kind of responsibility. The incident in the yard had changed him, had opened his eyes to realities his parents had tried to prepare him for, but it had also shown him that his voice, even as a child, could matter. Can I play with my car tomorrow? He asked suddenly. His mother smiled. Of course you can. In the front yard, he clarified. I want to play in the front yard again. His parents exchanged a look over his head, understanding the significance of this simple request. Absolutely, his father said firmly. That's your right, and no one should make you feel otherwise. Andre nodded, satisfied. Tomorrow he would reclaim his yard, his childhood joy. And maybe, just maybe, the work they'd done today would help ensure other children could do the same without fear or interruption. 3 months had passed since the community forum. Summer had given way to fall, and Andre's remote control car had been joined by a small drone, a gift from his father for his 11th birthday. Life had settled back into its normal rhythms, but with subtle differences that reflected how both Andre and his community had changed. On this crisp Saturday morning, Andre stood in the front yard, controller in hand, carefully guiding the drone in gentle circles overhead. He'd become quite skilled at flying it, though his mother still insisted he keep it below the height of their roof and within the boundaries of their property. Looking good, called a voice from the sidewalk. Andre turned to see Officer Reynolds, now familiar enough that Andre thought of him by name rather than just as the police officer. Walking by in civilian clothes, a young boy about 6 years old holding his hand. Thanks, Andre replied with a small wave. I've been practicing. In the weeks following the forum, Officer Reynolds had made a point of walking his beat through the neighborhood regularly, stopping to chat with residents and making himself a known presence. He'd apologized to Andre's family privately and had taken a personal interest in building better relationships with the community's young people. This is my nephew Tyler, Officer Reynolds said, gently encouraging the shy boy forward. He's visiting for the weekend and very interested in drones. Andre smiled at the younger child. Do you want to see how it works? Tyler nodded eagerly, and with a glance at Officer Reynolds for permission, Andre began demonstrating the drone's features. From the porch, Andre's mother watched the interaction, with a cup of coffee in hand, a small smile on her face. These moments, a police officer and his nephew chatting comfortably with her son in their front yard, represented exactly the kind of change her husband had been working toward. Inside the house, Congressman Johnson was on yet another conference call, this one with colleagues from across the country who were interested in the community engagement model he'd developed following the incident with Andre. The program had been featured in national news and was gaining attention as a potential template for other communities struggling with similar tensions. Andre demonstrated a simple figure-8 pattern with the drone, earning an impressed wow from Tyler. Officer Reynolds checked his watch. We should get going, buddy, he said to his nephew. We're meeting your mom for lunch, remember? Then to Andre. Thanks for showing him the drone. Maybe next time you could teach him a little more. Sure, Andre agreed easily. Anytime you're walking by. As they said their goodbyes, Andre noticed a car slowing as it passed his house. The driver was the man from across the street, the same one who had called the police on him months ago. Their eyes met briefly, and the man gave a small, awkward nod before continuing on his way. The man, Mr. Harrington, Andre had learned, had never directly apologized. But after the story made local news and the community forum had brought attention to the incident, he'd become noticeably more reserved, perhaps embarrassed by his role in what had happened. Andre's father had encouraged forgiveness rather than resentment, explaining that true change happened when people learned from their mistakes. Who was that? Andre's mother asked as he returned to the porch, the drone safely tucked under his arm. Mr. Harrington, Andre replied with a shrug. He just drove by. His mother nodded, understanding the significance without needing elaboration. Your father's wrapping up his call soon. Then we need to get ready to head over to the community center. Today marked the official opening of the new Youth Leadership Program, an initiative born directly from the community forum. Andre's father had worked with Dr. Powell from the Youth Center and several other community leaders to create a program where young people could learn about civic engagement, conflict resolution, and community advocacy. Andre was enrolled as part of the first cohort of 30 students from across the district. The program wasn't just about police-community relations. It was broader than that, teaching kids how to be active, engaged citizens who understood both their rights and their responsibilities. Inside, his father had just ended his call when Andre entered. All set for today? Congressman Johnson asked, organizing the papers on his desk. I think so, Andre replied, setting his drone carefully on its charging station. A little nervous, though. His father looked up with a warm smile. That's perfectly normal. Leadership isn't about never feeling nervous. It's about moving forward despite those feelings. Andre nodded, having heard variations of this wisdom from his father many times over the past few months. Do you think the other kids will like me? Or will they just see me as the congressman's son who started all this? His father came around the desk and placed his hands on Andre's shoulders, looking him directly in the eyes. They'll see you as Andre, a young man who stood up and spoke his truth, who helped create something positive out of a difficult experience. An hour later, the Johnson family arrived at the community center, which buzzed with activity. Banners announcing the Youth Leadership Program hung in the entrance hall, and volunteers in matching t-shirts directed families toward the main assembly room. Andre spotted several familiar faces, classmates from school, kids from his neighborhood, and a few he recognized from the forum. There was Thomas, his friend who had attended the forum with his parents, and Lee, a girl from his science class who had interviewed him for the school newspaper after the event. Dr. Powell approached, her colorful braids now adorned with beaded accessories that clicked softly as she moved. Congressman Johnson, Dr. Johnson, so good to see you. She turned to Andre with a warm smile. And Andre, we're so excited to have you in our inaugural group. Andre smiled politely. Thank you for having me. Actually, Dr. Powell continued, I was hoping you might say a few words at the opening ceremony. Nothing formal. Just share why you wanted to be part of the program and what you hope to learn. Andre looked at his parents, a flutter of nervousness in his stomach, but also a growing sense of confidence. Over the past months, he'd become more comfortable with speaking up, with using his voice to express his thoughts and feelings. I can do that, he agreed. His father squeezed his shoulder with pride. We'll be right in the audience. The ceremony began with remarks from Dr. Powell, followed by the mayor and several program sponsors. Andre sat with the other youth participants, listening attentively but also observing the crowd. The room was filled with families from all parts of the community, different neighborhoods, backgrounds, and experiences coming together for a common purpose. When Dr. Powell called him to the podium, Andre walked forward with measured steps, remembering his father's advice to move deliberately when nervous. The microphone had been lowered to accommodate his height, a thoughtful detail that made him smile. Hi, I'm Andre Johnson, he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. 3 months ago, I was just a kid playing with my remote control car in my front yard when something happened that changed my life. He briefly recounted the incident, keeping the details simple but honest. At first, I was just confused and scared. Then I was angry. But my parents taught me that when something unfair happens, we have choices about how to respond. Andre looked out at the audience, finding his parents' proud faces, Officer Reynolds sitting near the back, and many of the people who had attended the forum. We could have just been angry or sad about what happened, But instead, my dad helped create something positive. And that's what I hope to learn more about in this program. How to turn difficult experiences into opportunities to make things better. Not just for myself, but for everyone. He gestured to the other young participants. All of us have stories and ideas that matter. Sometimes adults don't listen to kids because they think we're too young to understand complicated problems. But we understand more than they realize, and we have fresh ways of looking at things. Andre's confidence grew as he spoke, his natural enthusiasm emerging. I'm excited to learn leadership skills and how our government works. But mostly, I'm looking forward to working with other kids who want to make our community better for everyone. Thank you. The applause was warm and genuine as Andre returned to his seat, receiving high fives from several of his fellow participants. The program officially began after the ceremony, with the young people divided into small groups for icebreaker activities. Andre found himself in a circle with 5 other kids, including Thomas and a boy named Luis, who lived in a different part of town. My dad saw you on the news, Luis said during their introduction activity. He said you were brave to speak up like that. Andre felt a mix of embarrassment and pride at the recognition. I was just telling the truth about what happened. That's what makes it brave, a girl named Zoe chimed in. Telling the truth even when it's hard. As the day progressed, Andre found himself relaxing into the group dynamic. These weren't just kids who saw him as the congressman's son or the boy from the news story. They were peers with their own stories, their own reasons for joining the program. During the lunch break, Andre sat with his new group at a table near the windows. His parents had stepped out to speak with some of the program organizers, giving him space to connect with the other participants on his own. So what do you want to do when you grow up? Thomas asked between bites of his sandwich. Be a congressman like your dad? Andre considered this. Before the incident, he'd been more interested in science and space exploration than politics. But the past few months had opened his eyes to another kind of impact he could have. Maybe, he admitted, or maybe something with law or community work. I'm not sure yet. He looked around at the others. What about you guys? The conversation flowed easily as they shared their aspirations: teacher, doctor, artist, engineer. Andre listened with genuine interest, seeing each of his new friends as someone with unique potential to shape the future. By the end of the day, the initial group of strangers had begun to form connections that felt promising. Phone numbers were exchanged, social media accounts followed, and plans made to meet up before the next session. As Andre walked back to the car with his parents, his father asked, "So, what did you think?" Andre considered the question seriously. I think this is going to be important. Not just for me, but for all of us." His mother smiled. "That's exactly the point. And you know what else?" Andre continued. "Today nobody treated me differently because of what happened. They just saw me as me." His father nodded, understanding the significance of this observation. That's how it should be. As they drove home, Andre gazed out the window at his community. The same streets and buildings he'd known all his life, but somehow different now. The incident in his yard had been a moment of injustice, a harsh introduction to realities his parents had tried to shield him from while still preparing him to face them. But what had followed? The conversations. The forum, this new program, represented possibility. The possibility that talking honestly about difficult things could lead to understanding. The possibility that one voice, even a young one, could help create change.